The dust swirled around Kekstara's feet as she brushed away centuries of dirt from the strange crystal tablets. Her blue skin glistened with sweat under the hot suns of Zephyria Prime. As the lead archaeologist for the Valerian Empire, she had found many old things before, but nothing like this. The tablets were smooth and cold to touch. Strange symbols glowed faintly when her fingers traced over them. She called to her assistant, a young Valerian named Zietmer. "Bring the translation device," she said. "These markings look like the old Forerunner language." The Forerunners were a mystery that had puzzled the galaxy for thousands of years. They had built great cities and amazing machines, then vanished without a trace. Some said they had become gods. Others believed they had destroyed themselves. No one knew for sure. Zietmer hurried over with the heavy translation machine. The device hummed to life as it scanned the crystal tablets. Words began to appear on the screen, first in the old language, then translated into modern Valerian. Kekstara read the words aloud. A prophecy of the dark tide. Her voice grew quiet. 5 great threats shall rise to test the children of the stars. She continued reading. The first threat was called the Void Devourers, creatures that ate entire star systems. The galaxy had fought them long ago and won, but at great cost. The second threat was the machine consciousness, artificial minds that tried to replace all living things. They had been stopped too, but barely. The third threat was the psionic plague, a disease of the mind that drove entire species mad. It took centuries to find a cure. The fourth threat was the reality weavers, beings who could change the laws of physics itself. They had been trapped in another dimension, but the prison was not perfect. Then came the fifth threat. Kekstara's hands shook as she read the final words. The last and greatest danger shall come from the third world of a yellow star. They call themselves humans, and they are the most terrible of all. For where others conquer through strength, these beings conquer through spirit. When the children of Terra walk among the stars, the galaxy shall know fear, for nothing shall remain unchanged in their wake. Zietmer stepped back. Humans? I have never heard of such a species. Neither have I, Kekstara whispered. But if the Forerunners were right about the other 4 threats, then ... She did not finish the thought. Instead, she carefully packed the crystal tablets. The Valerian High Council needed to see this immediately. Far across the galaxy, on a small, blue world called Earth, Commander Jake Harrison checked his instruments one more time. Today was the day humanity would take its first step into the larger universe. The starship New Horizons sat ready on the launch pad, its new faster-than-light drive humming with power. "All systems green," called out Lisa Carter from the pilots seat. She was the best pilot Earth had ever produced, calm under pressure and quick to smile. "Engine readings normal," reported Pete Sullivan from engineering. His thick hands moved over the controls with surprising gentleness. Pete could fix anything, and he usually did it while telling jokes. "Biological scanners online," said Amy Brooks, from her science station. As Earth's top expert on alien life, she would be the first to study any creatures they might meet. Her excitement was hard to hide. Jake looked at his crew. They were good people, chosen not just for their skills, but for their ability to represent humanity well. If they met aliens out there, these would be the first humans those aliens would see. "Ready for jump," Jake announced. Next stop, the Centauri system. The ship lurched as space twisted around them. Stars stretched into lines of light, then snapped back into points. They had done it. Humanity had broken free from its home system. "Contact on sensors," Amy reported. 3 ships, unknown design. On the main screen, sleek vessels appeared. They were beautiful in a way that human ships were. Not all curves and flowing lines. Lights pulsed along their hulls in patterns that almost looked like writing. "They're hailing us," Lisa said. The screen flickered, then showed a face unlike anything they had ever seen. The being had blue skin and large eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. When it spoke, the translation computer turned its words into English. "Greetings, unknown travelers. I am Captain Veltara of the Valerian Deep Space Patrol. What species are you, and from which world do you come?" Jake stepped forward. "I am Commander Jake Harrison, representing the species called humans from the planet Earth. We come in peace, seeking friendship and knowledge." Captain Veltara's expression changed. The welcome in her eyes turned to something else. Fear? Confusion? She spoke quickly to someone off-screen, then turned back to the humans. "Did you say humans from Earth?" "Yes," Jake replied. "Is there a problem?" Veltara was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was careful and controlled. "You must come with us immediately. The High Council will want to meet you." "That sounds wonderful," Jake said. "We would be honored." But something in the alien captain's tone worried him. This was not the reaction he had expected. As the human ship followed the Valerian vessels toward their home world, emergency messages raced ahead of them through space. The Valerian High Council received word that humans had arrived, just as Kexthara was presenting her discovery of the ancient prophecy. Council leader Thexaron read the crystal tablets with growing alarm. Around the great chamber, other council members whispered to each other in worried voices. "The timing cannot be coincidence," Thexaron announced. "The prophecy speaks of humans as the final threat, and now they appear in our space. We must decide quickly what to do." Some council members wanted to attack the human ship immediately. Others argued for caution. If the prophecy was true, humans might be too dangerous to fight directly. "We should study them first," suggested Council Member Yexandra. "Learn their weaknesses before we act." "And if they are as dangerous as the prophecy claims?" asked another. "What if studying them only makes things worse?" The debate continued as the new horizon drew closer to the Valerian homeworld. Neither humans nor aliens knew that an ancient prophecy was about to change both their peoples forever. Jake Harrison looked out at the alien city growing larger on his screen. He thought about the historic moment they were living through. First contact between humans and an alien civilization. His children would read about this day in history books. He had no idea that somewhere in that beautiful alien city, powerful beings were reading about humans in a very different kind of book. A book that called his people the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. Dr. Elena Martinez stepped off the transport shuttle and looked around the alien research facility with wonder. 3 months had passed since first contact, and she still could not believe she was actually here, working alongside beings from other worlds. The Valerians had been polite but distant since the humans arrived. They gave the human delegation a comfortable place to stay and allowed some joint research projects. But Elena could sense something was wrong. The aliens acted like they were studying dangerous animals rather than meeting new friends. "Good morning, Dr. Martinez," said Dr. Kev Fall, her Valerian research partner. His English was getting better every day, though he still struggled with some words. "Good morning," Elena replied. "Have you made any progress on the cultural comparison?" "Study?" Kevthal's blue skin darkened slightly, which Elena had learned meant he was uncomfortable. "There are some ... interesting patterns in human behavior that concern my people." Elena sat down at her desk. "What kind of patterns?" "You adapt too quickly," Kevthal said. "Most species take centuries to adjust to new situations. Humans seem to do it in days or weeks." Elena laughed. "Is that bad? I thought adaptation was a good thing. For most species, yes. But humans take it to extremes. Look at Captain Mitchell's crew." Elena knew the story. Captain Ryan Mitchell's ship had been caught in a deadly nebula while exploring a distant system. The radiation should have killed them all within hours. Instead, the human crew had found ways to shield themselves and even discovered how to use the nebula's energy to power their ship. They survived, Elena said. How is that a problem? Because the nebula has killed every other species that entered it, Kefthal replied. In 10,000 years, hundreds of ships have been lost there. And humans arrive and not only survive, but find a way to benefit from it. Elena was beginning to understand the aliens' nervousness. You think we're too unpredictable. Among other things, yes. Across the galaxy, Admiral Kate Williams was having her own difficulties. She had been chosen to establish Earth's first embassy on Nexus Station, a neutral meeting place for dozens of different species. It should have been an honor, but the other ambassadors treated her like she carried a dangerous disease. Ambassador Williams, said the hegemony representative, a tall, gray-skinned being called Nex Valdris. My government has concerns about human expansion into our territory. Kate kept her voice calm. We have no plans for expansion. We're here to trade and learn. That is what concerns us, Nex Valdris replied. Other species expand through conquest or colonization. We understand those motives. But humans seem to expand through influence. I don't understand. Nex Valdris activated a holographic display showing recent events across human-contacted worlds. Wherever humans go, local populations begin to change. They start questioning old ways of doing things. They demand new rights and freedoms. Kate looked at the images. She saw alien workers forming unions after meeting human traders. She saw young aliens leaving traditional jobs to pursue art or science after talking with human visitors. She saw entire communities reorganizing themselves along more democratic lines. These look like positive changes to me, Kate said. Perhaps, but change is dangerous. Our civilizations have been stable for thousands of years. Human influence threatens that stability. Meanwhile, Alex Turner was completely unaware that his simple business trip had started a revolution. As a trader from Earth, he had gone to the industrial world of Korath to establish new supply contracts. He had no idea that the local workers were treated like slaves. When Alex saw the conditions in the factories, he was horrified. Workers labored 18 hours a day for barely enough food to survive. They lived in crowded barracks and had no rights at all. This is terrible, Alex told his Korath guide, a thin, exhausted-looking alien named Dokmer. Why do you accept this? Dokmer looked confused. Accept? This is simply how things are. Workers work, owners profit. It has always been this way. But it doesn't have to be, Alex said. Where I come from, workers have rights. They get fair pay, safe working conditions, time off to rest. Such things are impossible, Dokmer replied. If workers had such privileges, how would the owners make profit? Alex spent the next few days explaining concepts that seemed simple to him, but revolutionary to the Korath workers. Fair wages, safety regulations, the right to organize, the idea that workers deserved dignity and respect. Within a week, the workers had formed their first union. Within a month, they were striking for better conditions. Within 3 months, the old corporate system had collapsed and been replaced by worker cooperatives. The Korath Rebellion, as historians would later call it, sent shockwaves through the galaxy. If human ideas could transform an entire world so quickly, what would happen when more humans arrived? Back on the Valerian home world, the High Council was meeting in emergency session. Kexthara presented her translation of more crystal tablets she had found. The prophecy is very specific, she reported. It says humans will not conquer through force, but through the power of their ideas. They will make others believe that change is possible. Council leader Thexaron studied the ancient text. What else does it say? That wherever humans go, the old ways will crumble, that they carry within them a vision of what could be, and this vision spreads like fire among dry grass. And the final result? Kekstara's voice was barely a whisper. The prophecy says that in the end, nothing will remain as it was. The entire galaxy will be transformed. Young Ziegmer, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke up. Perhaps the prophecy does not mean this as a bad thing? The entire council turned to stare at him. Dexeron's eyes were cold. Explain yourself. Well, Ziegmer said nervously, what if the changes humans bring are good changes? The Korath workers seem happier now. The research station reports that human scientists solve problems in new ways that help everyone. Change is chaos, Dexeron declared. Order is peace. The humans threaten both. But some council members were beginning to have doubts. In secret meetings, they whispered about the human embassy on Nexus Station. Ambassador Williams was known for her fairness and honesty. Human scientists shared their discoveries freely. Instead of keeping them secret, human traders dealt honestly with all species. These did not seem like the actions of a great threat. Dr. Elena Martinez was working late in her lab when Kevthal approached her with a troubled expression. Elena, he said, I must ask you something, and I need an honest answer. Of course. Are humans planning to conquer the galaxy? Elena was so surprised, she almost dropped her tablet. What? No. Why would you think that? Because everywhere humans go, things change. Species that have lived the same way for millennia suddenly start demanding new freedoms. Old governments fall. New ideas spread. Elena set down her work and looked at her alien friend. Kevthal, humans don't want to conquer anyone. We just believe that everyone deserves to be free and happy. But that belief is itself a form of conquest, Kevthal said. You conquer minds instead of bodies. Is it conquest if people choose to change? No one is forcing the Korath workers to form unions. They decided to do it after learning they had other options. Kevthal was quiet for a long moment. My people have a saying, the deepest chains are those we do not know we wear. Perhaps humans show others that their chains exist. And is that a bad thing? I do not know anymore, Kevthal admitted. The prophecy says humans are the greatest threat to galactic civilization. But perhaps the prophecy does not define threat the way we assumed. As reports continued to arrive from human-contacted worlds, one pattern became clear. Everywhere humans went, people became more hopeful. They started to believe that their lives could be better. They began to dream of futures they had never imagined possible. To the rulers and elites who benefited from the old ways, this was indeed a terrible threat. But to the common people of 1,000 worlds, the humans were beginning to look like something else entirely. They looked like hope. Colonel Ben Parker looked down at the burning city below his transport ship. Salvaria had been at war for 300 years. The Kree and the Holt had fought over this world for so many generations that most people had forgotten what started the conflict. Landing zone secured, reported Sergeant Danny Foster over the radio. But there's active fighting 2 blocks from our position. Ben sighed. Earth had sent his team to deliver medical supplies and food to war refugees. It was supposed to be a simple humanitarian mission. Nothing was ever simple on Salvaria. Dr. Grace, are you ready? Ben asked. Dr. Grace Foster checked her medical equipment one more time. Ready, sir. Though I have to say, trying to help people who are shooting at each other is going to be interesting. Sam Hughes, their cultural specialist, looked nervous. Sir, both sides have sent messages warning us not to help their enemies. They say they'll attack any humans who give aid to the other side. Then I guess we'll help everyone, Ben said simply. The transport landed in a bombed-out square between the 2 armies. Almost immediately, Weapons fire erupted from both directions. Ben's team took cover behind their ship. "This is Colonel Parker of Earth Forces," Ben announced over loudspeakers. "We are here to provide medical aid to anyone who needs it." "We are not taking sides in your conflict." The shooting stopped for a moment. Then a Kree officer emerged from behind a ruined building, his weapon pointed at the humans. "You will help only Kree wounded," the officer demanded. "The Holt are our enemies." Before Ben could answer, a Holt commander appeared from the opposite direction. "Ignore the Kree dog," she shouted. "Help only the true people of Selvaria." Ben stepped out into the open, hands raised but empty. Both alien commanders tensed. "I'm going to tell you both something," Ben said calmly. "We didn't come here to choose sides. We came here because people are suffering, and suffering doesn't have a nationality. You must choose," the Kree officer insisted. "There is no neutrality in this war." "Watch me," Ben replied. He walked to the nearest wounded alien, a young Holt soldier who had been hit by shrapnel. As Ben knelt down to examine the injury, Dr. Grace hurried over with her medical kit. "You are helping a Holt," the Kree officer snarled. "You have chosen your side." "No," Ben said without looking up. "I'm helping a person who's hurt." As Dr. Grace worked on the wounded Holt, Ben spotted a Kree soldier lying nearby, also badly injured. He walked over and began applying first aid. Both commanders stared in confusion. "What are you doing?" the Holt leader demanded. "Helping someone who needs help," Ben answered. For the first time in years, the square fell completely silent, except for the sounds of medical work. Both armies watched as humans moved between wounded soldiers of both species, treating injuries without asking which side anyone was on. Sam Hughes approached the two commanders. "Would you like to hear something interesting? On Earth, we have a saying, 'The enemy of my enemy is my friend.' But we have another saying, too. There are no enemies, only people who haven't learned to understand each other yet." "Impossible," the Kree officer said. "The Holt have killed thousands of our people, and the Kree have killed thousands of ours," the Holt commander replied angrily. "Why?" Sam asked simply. Both leaders stared at him. "What do you mean, why?" "I mean, what are you actually fighting about? What started this war?" The commanders looked at each other uncertainly. They attacked us first," the Kree officer said. "That's a lie," the Holt commander snapped. "You invaded our territory." "What? Territory?" Sam asked. "Who decided where your borders should be?" Again, silence. Finally, the Holt commander spoke. "The old treaties, from before the war." "But the treaties were unfair," the Kree officer protested. "The Holt got all the good farmland." "Because we were here first," the Holt shot back. Sam nodded thoughtfully. "So you're fighting over who gets what resources?" "That makes sense. But has 300 years of war gotten you more resources?" Both commanders looked around at the ruined city. Clearly, the war had destroyed far more than it had gained for either side. Meanwhile, Dr. Grace was teaching alien medics from both sides how to treat battlefield injuries more effectively. "The important thing," she explained, "is to stop the bleeding first, regardless of what species the patient is. Blood loss kills everyone the same way." A young Kree medic raised his hand. "But Dr. Grace, this technique would work on Holt soldiers." "Too. Of course it would," Grace replied. "Medical science doesn't care about politics." The Holt medic working beside him nodded. "She's right. I've seen too many people die from injuries that should have been treatable." As the day wore on, something strange began to happen. Soldiers from both sides started talking to each other while they waited for medical treatment. They discovered they had more in common than they had differences. They were all tired of war. They all wanted to go home to their families. Ben called the two commanders over to where he was treating a severely wounded Kree soldier. "This man is going to die unless we get him to a hospital immediately. But the nearest hospital is in Holt territory." The Holt commander looked down at the injured. Enemy. For a moment, her face was hard with years of hatred. Then something changed. "I'll provide escort," she said quietly. "Commander," one of her officers protested. "He's Kree." "He's also someone's son," she replied. 3 days later, an impossible thing happened on Selvaria. Both armies agreed to a ceasefire so that human medics could treat all the wounded safely. The ceasefire was only supposed to last 1 day, not it lasted a week. Then a month. Colonel Ben Parker found himself mediating between the two sides, not because anyone appointed him to do so, but because both armies started bringing their disputes to him instead of solving them with weapons. "The humans have a strange way of thinking," the Kree officer confided to Ben. "They see solutions where we see only problems." "How do you do it?" the Holt commander asked. "How do you remain neutral when everyone around you is fighting?" Ben thought about his answer carefully. "We learned a long time ago that most fights aren't really about what people think they're about. Usually, they're about fear or hurt feelings, or misunderstandings. Once you address the real problem, the fighting often stops by itself." Far across the galaxy, Tony Rodriguez was having his own impact on alien society, though he didn't realize it at first. As a maintenance engineer, Tony had been assigned to repair an ancient space station that served as a trading post for several species. The station's central computer had been broken for over 1,000 years. Every species in the galaxy had tried to fix it, but the Forerunner technology was too advanced and too alien for anyone to understand. Tony looked at the massive machine and scratched his head. "Well," he said to his alien assistant, a nervous Valerian named Tekmer, "let's see what this thing does." "Many great minds have studied this device," Tekmer said. "The greatest engineers of a dozen species have declared it impossible to repair." "Maybe they were thinking too hard," Tony replied. He pulled out his toolkit and started taking panels off the machine. Tekmer was horrified. "You cannot simply disassemble Forerunner technology. It must be approached with reverence and careful study." "It's just a computer," Tony said. "A really old, really complicated computer, but still just a computer. And I've been fixing computers since I was 12 years old." For 3 days, Tony crawled through the machine, tracing circuits and testing components. He hummed while he worked and talked to the computer like it was an old friend. Tekmer followed behind him, certain that the human was about to destroy one of the galaxy's greatest archaeological treasures. On the 4th day, the station's lights suddenly came on for the first time in a millennium. "How?" Tekmer whispered. In amazement, Tony wiped grease off his hands. The main problem was a blown capacitor in the power distribution system. The backup systems were trying to compensate, but they weren't designed to handle the full load for more than a few days. After 1,000 years, they were fried too. But the greatest minds in the galaxy studied this machine. Yeah, and they probably spent so much time trying to understand the advanced parts that they never checked the basic components, Tony said. Sometimes the simplest explanation is the right one. Word of Tony's success spread quickly through the galactic community. The human had fixed something that had been considered impossible to repair. Even more disturbing to some aliens, he had done it by ignoring conventional wisdom and approaching the problem in a completely new way. Professor Lavra Bell was causing her own kind of trouble at the Galactic University. As Earth's first exchange student, she was supposed to study alien cultures and report back to Earth. Instead, she was accidentally starting a revolution among alien students. "I don't understand," her roommate Zarelin said. Zara was a young hegemony citizen who had never questioned her society's rigid class system. "Why do you study art when you are not born to the artist caste?" Lara looked up from her painting. Because I enjoy it. Because it makes me happy. But happiness is not the purpose of life, Zara said, confused. The purpose of life is to fulfill your assigned role in society. Says who? Lavra asked. The question stunned Zara into silence. No one had ever asked her that before. The attack came without warning. Admiral Nick Stevens was reviewing supply reports when alarms began blaring throughout the human fleet base on Titan Station. Sir, we have multiple contacts jumping in at the system edge, reported Lieutenant Sarah Bell from the communications station. At least 40 ships, unknown configuration. Nick rushed to the command center. On the main display, he could see the attacking fleet spreading out in attack formation. The ships were sleek and deadly, unlike anything in human records. Are they responding to our hails? Nick asked. Negative, sir. They're jamming all frequencies except one. There's a message coming through now. The screen flickered, then showed a collection of alien faces. Nick recognized some of the species from diplomatic contacts, but their expressions were cold and hostile. Attention, human forces, came the translated voice. By order of the Preservation Coalition, your expansion into galactic space must end. Surrender now and accept relocation to your home system, or face the consequences. Nick stepped forward. This is Admiral Nick Stevens of Earth Defense Force. We have no quarrel with any of your species. Why are you attacking us? Your very existence is a threat to galactic stability, the coalition leader replied. An ancient prophecy has made this clear. You will surrender or be destroyed. The transmission ended, and the alien ships opened. Fire. Captain Sophie Davis was commanding a supply convoy near the Vega system when coalition forces surrounded her small fleet. Her 3 ships were no match for the enemy squadron. Captain, they're demanding our surrender, her communications officer reported. Sophie looked around at her crew. These were good people, civilians mostly, just trying to deliver food and medicine to the new human colonies. They didn't deserve to die for someone else's fears. Open a channel, she ordered. The enemy commander appeared on screen, a tall, gray-skinned alien with cold eyes. You will power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. I'll power down weapons, Sophie agreed. But I want to know something. First, why are you doing this? What have we done wrong? The alien commander seemed surprised by the question. You are human. That is enough. But what does that mean? I'm a ship captain. My crew delivers supplies to colonies. We've never hurt anyone. Your species corrupts others with your chaotic ideas, the commander replied. You must be stopped before you destroy galactic civilization. Sophie's ship shuddered as the coalition forces boarded. Within minutes, she and her crew were prisoners. But something unexpected happened during the long journey to the prison. Camps. Sophie talked to her guards. She asked them about their families, their homes, their hopes for the future. She listened when they complained about the war, about being away from their loved ones, about orders they didn't understand. Why do you care? Asked one guard, a young Kree soldier named Mortex. Because you're a person, Sophie replied simply. Everyone has a story worth hearing. By the time they reached the prison camp, 3 of her guards had begun to question why they were fighting a war against people who seemed so much like themselves. Lieutenant, Commander Jack Morrison was defending New Terra Colony when the Coalition fleet arrived. His small force was outnumbered 10-1, but the colonists were counting on him to protect them. Sir, they're demanding we evacuate the planet, reported his tactical officer. Jack looked down at the colony below. Families were working in the fields. Children were playing in the streets. People were building homes and dreams. He couldn't just abandon them. Open a channel to the enemy fleet, he ordered. The coalition commander was a hegemony admiral named Kex Baldrin. His scaled face showed no emotion as he delivered his ultimatum. You have 1 hour to remove all humans from this world, Kex Valderon stated. If you refuse, we will remove you by force. Admiral, Jack said quietly, can I ask you something? You have children? Kex Valdrin blinked in surprise. What? Children. A family. People you care about. Ah, yes. 2 offspring, but this is not relevant. It's very relevant, Jack continued. Look down at that colony. Those are families too. Parents who just want their children to be safe and happy. Kids who are probably scared right now because there are warships in their sky. Kex Valdrin's expression wavered slightly. They are human children. They're just children, Jack replied. They laugh when they're happy and cry when they're hurt. Just like your kids do. The hour deadline came and went. Instead of attacking, the coalition fleet held position. More ships arrived, but still no attack came. Jack kept talking to them, sharing stories about the colonists, explaining their hopes and dreams. Some coalition. Ships began to leave. Their crews couldn't bring themselves to attack a world full of families. The war spread across dozens of systems, but it was unlike any conflict the galaxy had ever seen. Human forces were vastly outnumbered, but they refused to fight the way their enemies expected. Dr. Rachel Stone had been captured during the battle for the research station at Kepler 442. She was taken to a massive prison camp on the world of Oru. Detention Prime, where the coalition was holding prisoners from various species. The camp was designed to break spirits. Prisoners from different species were kept separate and given barely enough food to survive. Guards encouraged conflicts between different groups to prevent them from working together. Rachel looked around at the despair and decided she couldn't accept it. She started by sharing her food with a wounded Arcturian in the next cell. The guards punished her, but she kept doing it. Then she began teaching other prisoners basic medical skills so they could help each other. Why do you help us? Asked a Rigelian prisoner named Voxmar. We are not your species. We're all in the same situation, Rachel replied. Helping each other is the only way any of us will survive this. Within weeks, Rachel had organized the prisoners into a cooperative community. Different species shared their knowledge and skills. Arcturians taught advanced mathematics, Rigelians shared engineering techniques, and humans contributed medical knowledge and organizational skills. The guards became nervous as they watched former enemies working together. When they tried to break up the cooperation, the prisoners protected each other. Arcturians would stand between human prisoners and punishment details. Rigelians would share their food rations with weaker species. This is not how prison camps are supposed to work, complained Guard Captain Nextoris to his superior. Then make it work properly, came the cold reply. But every harsh measure the guards tried only made the prisoners more united. When they cut food rations, the prisoners organized a sharing system. When they tried to isolate leaders, other prisoners took their place. Rachel found herself talking to Guard Captain Nextoris during one of his inspections. Your resistance is pointless, he told her. The coalition will win this war. This isn't about winning or losing, Rachel replied. It's about treating people with dignity. You are prisoners. You have no dignity. Rachel looked around at the camp, where prisoners from a dozen species were working together, teaching each other, caring for the sick and weak. Look around you, she said softly. Do we look like people without dignity? Nextoris followed her gaze and saw something that troubled him. He saw beings who should have been broken by imprisonment, instead building a community. He saw natural enemies helping each other survive. He saw hope in places where there should have been only despair. 3 months later, Detention Prime experienced the largest prisoner uprising in galactic history. But it wasn't a violent revolt. Instead, the prisoners simply declared their community independent and invited the guards to join them as equals. Half the guards defected. Back in the main war zone, Coalition commanders were discovering that fighting humans was like trying to hold water. Every victory seemed to create new problems. Admiral Kex Valdrin had finally forced the evacuation of New Terra Colony, but the human civilians hadn't fled in panic as expected. Instead, they had organized an orderly withdrawal, helping each other, and even leaving behind supplies for Coalition forces with notes saying, "For when you're ready to talk." The Admiral's own officers were becoming difficult to command. They kept asking questions about the war's purpose and wondering aloud why they were fighting people who seemed so reasonable. Admiral, his second-in-command, asked privately, "Are we certain these humans are the threat the prophecy described?" Kex Valdrin had been wondering the same thing, but he couldn't admit it. The prophecy is clear. They are dangerous. But dangerous how? They don't seem to want to conquer anyone. They share their technology freely. They treat prisoners well, even when we don't. That is exactly what makes them dangerous, Kex Valdrin replied, though he was no longer sure he believed it himself. On the Coalition's home worlds, news of the war was creating unexpected reactions. Citizens were hearing about human prisoners who organized hospitals and prison camps. They learned about human soldiers who refused to attack civilians even when outnumbered. They saw recordings of humans sharing food with enemy wounded. Young Coalition citizens began asking uncomfortable questions. If humans were supposed to be monsters, why did they act more honorably than the Coalition forces? Grand Executor Vashti called an emergency M. Dr. Kevin Walsh never expected to change the course of galactic history. He was just an archaeologist who loved solving old mysteries. But when his team discovered the lost Forerunner home world, hidden in a nebula near the galactic core, everything changed. "The readings are incredible," reported his assistant, Dr. Amy Parker, as their ship approached the ancient planet. "The entire surface is covered with Forerunner structures, all perfectly preserved." Kevin stared at the world through the viewport. After decades of studying Forerunner artifacts, he was finally going to see where they came from. The landing was smooth, and Kevin's team immediately began exploring the vast city that covered most of the planet's main continent. The architecture was beautiful, but somehow sad, like a monument to something that had been lost. "Over here," called team member Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, "I found what looks like a central archive." The archive was a massive crystal chamber filled with data storage devices that still glowed with power after millions of years. Kevin approached the central console carefully and activated the translation system. Immediately, holographic displays came to life around them. The history of the Forerunners began to unfold in images and text. "They were like us once," Kevin whispered as he read the ancient records. "Curious, passionate, always growing and changing." The history showed a species that had started much like humanity. They had been explorers and dreamers, always pushing boundaries and asking questions. They had built a great civilization based on freedom and discovery, but success had changed them. As they became more advanced, they became more detached from the struggles of ordinary life. They began to see themselves as guardians of galactic order rather than participants in galactic community. "Look at this," Amy said, pointing to a display showing the later period of Forerunner history. They stopped growing. They reached a point where they thought they had learned everything worth learning. The records showed how the Forerunners had eventually become so focused on maintaining their perfect order that they forgot how to live. They had achieved everything they thought they wanted, but in doing so, they had lost the very qualities that made them who they were. They died of perfection, Kevin realized. They became so advanced and so orderly that they stopped being alive in any meaningful way. Then Kevin found the prophecy chamber, and everything suddenly made sense. The crystal tablets containing the prophecy weren't warnings about threats to galactic civilization. They were instructions for saving it. The translation was wrong. Kevin said excitedly into his communicator, sending the message to Earth and every human ship in the galaxy. The prophecy isn't about threats to the galaxy. It's about gifts to the galaxy. As Kevin read the true prophecy aloud, his words were broadcast across space to both human and coalition forces gathering for the final battle around Earth. 5 great gifts shall the galaxy receive to restore what has been lost, Kevin translated. The Void Devourers shall teach the value of unity against darkness. The machine consciousness shall show the importance of retaining organic wisdom. The psionic plague shall demonstrate the strength found in mental diversity. The reality weavers shall remind all beings that change is the fundamental force of existence. Kevin's voice grew stronger as he reached the final passage. And the last and greatest gift shall come from the third world of a yellow star. They call themselves humans, and they carry within them the spark that we have lost. For where others seek perfection, these beings embrace growth. Where others fear change, they welcome it. When the children of Terra walk among the stars, the galaxy shall be reborn, for they remember what we forgot, that the journey is more important than the destination. Captain Danny Foster was leading the human defense fleet when Kevin's transmission reached them. Around Earth, thousands of ships from dozens of species faced off in the largest battle formation in galactic history. But as the true prophecy spread through both fleets, something unprecedented happened. Coalition ships began to stand down. Admiral Kex Valdrin to all coalition forces. Came a transmission from the enemy flagship. Cease all aggressive actions. I repeat, all ships stand down. On his bridge, Admiral Kex Valdrin was reading the Forerunner records with growing understanding. His second-in-command looked confused. Admiral, our orders are to destroy the human homeworld. Our orders were based on a lie, Kex Valdrin replied quietly. We were told the humans were a threat to galactic civilization, but they're not here to destroy our civilization. They're here to save it. Grand Executor Vashtai was not ready to give up. From his command ship, he sent angry messages to all coalition forces. The transmission is a human trick, he declared. The prophecy clearly states they are dangerous. We must complete our mission. But his own crews were no longer listening. Across the coalition fleet, soldiers and officers were laying down their weapons and refusing to fight. Sir, reported his own tactical officer, 70% of our ships are withdrawing from combat formation. They're requesting permission to return home. Vashtai's face turned purple with rage. They are committing treason. No, sir, the officer replied calmly. They're committing sense. Commander Lisa Morgan, Kevin's wife and the ranking human officer at Earth, opened a channel to the remaining coalition ships. This is Commander Morgan of Earth Defense Force. We know you've been told we're a threat to your way of life. Maybe that's true. But if your way of life requires you to destroy people who just want to explore and learn and grow, then maybe it's time for a change. Her words were simple, but they carried across space to listeners who were ready to hear them. On coalition ships, crew members looked at each other and realized they didn't want to be part of a war against people who reminded them of their own hopes and dreams. The final confrontation came not between fleets of ships, but in a meeting room on Nexus Station. Leaders from every major species gathered to discuss what would happen next. Grand Executor Vashtai arrived with a small group of hardliners, still insisting that humans must be contained. But he found himself facing not just human representatives, but leaders from his own coalition who had changed their minds. The humans have corrupted you all, Vashtai declared. Admiral Kex Valdrin stood up slowly. No, Executor. They've reminded yous of who we used to be before we became afraid of change. Change is chaos, Vashtai insisted. Change is life, replied Dr. Elena Martinez, speaking for the human delegation. Growth is what makes existence worthwhile. When you stop growing, you start dying. Around the table, alien leaders nodded in agreement. They had seen what human influence could do. Workers on industrial worlds were demanding fair treatment. Young people across the galaxy were choosing their own paths instead of accepting predetermined roles. Scientists were making breakthrough discoveries by combining human creativity with alien knowledge. Look around this room, Elena continued. A year ago, many of your species had never worked together. Now you're sitting at the same table, discussing how to build a better future for everyone. That's not chaos. That's hope. The Galactic Assembly was formed that day, replacing the old rigid hierarchies with a more flexible system where every world and every species had a voice. It wasn't perfect, and it would face many challenges, but it was built on the principle that everyone deserved the chance to grow and change. Vashtai and his remaining supporters left the station in disgust, retreating to a few isolated systems, where they tried to maintain the old ways. But their influence was broken. Most of their former followers chose to join the new galactic community. 5 years later, Commander Lisa Morgan stood before the Galactic Assembly as Earth's first elected representative to the galactic government. Around her sat delegates from hundreds of worlds, representing dozens of species that had learned to work together. The Forerunners left us a message, Lisa said in her inaugural address. They warned us not to make their mistake. They achieved perfection and lost their souls in the process. We choose a different path. She looked around at the diverse assembly, at beings who had once been enemies now working side by side. We choose to keep growing, keep learning, keep becoming more than we were. That's the real gift humans brought to the galaxy. Not conquest, not chaos, but the reminder that the universe is full of infinite possibilities if we're brave enough to embrace them. In the years that followed, the galaxy transformed in ways no one could have predicted. Old barriers between species began to dissolve as beings learned they had more in common than they had differences. Science advanced rapidly as different species shared their knowledge freely. Art and culture flourished as new forms of expression emerged from the mixing of different traditions. There were problems, of course. Change always brought challenges. But the galaxy had learned something important from the humans. Problems were not obstacles to be feared, but puzzles to be solved. On a small space station in the Centauri system, Dr. Kevin Walsh continued his archaeological work, now with teams of researchers from a dozen different species. They were studying the remnants of other ancient civilizations, learning from their successes and failures. Have you found any other prophecies? Asked his Valerian colleague, Dr. Kexthara, who